show that first occurred at the Provenzano Gallery at my college, Hobart and William Smith in Western New York, is now at Holy Family for kind of what I'm calling its second leg. So it's a traveling show, and I'm really trying to give as many people the opportunity to see Brazil reflections of the Afroperiphery as possible. And so Holy Family has been very instrumental in, providing the Philadelphia audience really with an opportunity to see this show for folks who couldn't make it all the way up to Western New York. So I'll go ahead and get started here. We should probably talk a little bit about what the Lisbon Group International Art Collective is. As you can see, I'm a pretty young guy, and so it might be a little odd to see a person my age, demographic, et cetera, talking about art and curation and all of this stuff. So the Lisbon Group International Art Collective was established in 2022, and as an organization, TLG International Art Collective is a cultural intermediary. You might be asking yourself, what does this mean? Well, it means that we facilitate intercontinental cultural exchange through our specialization in the importation, sale, and curation of Afro-peripheral fine art, and specifically that art which comes from the rich country of Brazil. I think that through access to art, which recounts diverse narratives, we really help North Americans have new experience, which is a huge motivator for our work here. So it's not just about dealing the art or doing the curations, but kind of what really drives the work here is giving people who are not South American or who are not Brazilian access to new opportunity through art shows that focus on this kind of art specifically. Now we can talk a little bit about how the collective operates and its structure. So the Lisbon Group International Art Collective is structured as an LLC out of Pennsylvania. I am its managing director, and as far as the administration goes, I do probably 95% of the work myself. As I say, I'm the managing director. I don't have another partner as far as the business side goes, but as far as getting the actual work done, I do work with a team of four full-time artists and also over a dozen associate artists based in both Brazil and West Africa. When I started TLG in 2022, I started with one full-time Brazilian artist, and then I had a few associate West African artists. And frankly, there were more associate artists from West Africa at that time than there were from Brazil. So the composition of kind of who I'm representing and of the organization as a whole has really changed over the last 2 years, and I'm really grateful for that. Another thing to mention is that social media is really crucial for this kind of work. Most of the artist development and the marketing that takes place, which is on the back end where most of the work happens through Instagram and different social media platforms. And without those, it would be really difficult for me to connect with artists that I don't know, and also to get art buyers and collectors connected with those artists. So Instagram and social media of that kind is definitely crucial. As far as the logistics, I do also have an artist that I manage full time who helps me as far as specializing in the international shipping. He's really good with it. We started working together 2 years ago. As I say, he was the first artist that I started to manage. And so he has this experience, and it's really helpful when he shares it with me so that I can then share it with other artists to, better facilitate that international shipping process. And then lastly, instant messaging and email communication are absolutely necessary. I communicate with artists like Bartol and Francisco, who are in this Zoom call right now. I communicate with them every day. We're texting through WhatsApp, we're emailing about projects. And so this is an everyday thing. And without access to these instant messaging platforms, this kind of work, again, would just be really difficult to have happen. So that we can talk a little bit about the collective's mission and kind of what drives our work from the back end. Afrocentric representation is definitely, a main feature of our work here. I'll just quote real quick a National Library of Medicine study from 2019, which analyzed 18 major museums in the US and analyzed their collections based on the composition, racial composition. And they found that, in these 18 major museums, only 1.2% of all the art collected was made by people of African descent. So within the US specifically, there is a clear gap between representation of Eurocentric art and representation of Afrocentric art. And so when I recognize this, you know, it just motivated me to think about what I could do to fill that gap. And so what I realized was that given my connections, given the people that I had known in Brazil, given the people I know here, and just given my interest, I found it necessary to increase fine art acquisition amongst underrepresented groups. So part of my work and the mission is to increase Afrocentric representation in museums and in galleries and in kind of these institutions where, you know, they're not as well represented. But also another piece of it is to encourage the acquisition of fine art amongst these underrepresented groups who, like Afro-Americans or other groups, are not as represented in museums. So I think as far as the acquisition goes amongst underrepresented groups, there's this perceived exclusivity. People think that, you know, art buying and dealing and collecting and curating even is something that like is exclusive to rich people. Maybe they think it has something to do with your race, but it's usually seen as just something that a small amount of people can do, and that is held in the hands of very few people. But I'm a kind of exhibit A that this isn't true. I'm an art dealer. I'm a collector. I would say my, you know, besides curating, my primary identity as far as the Lisbon group is concerned is definitely dealing. It's how I got started. Before there was opportunity for curation, I was at art fairs at my university just selling. And so the idea that you have to be either white or old or man or rich or whatever to do this is just not true. And part of my work is to help dispel this notion. I also like to focus on affordability. Affordability and access is important to me, so I don't price my works outrageously, for example. And I kind of look at how other people in the market are pricing similar works to then determine, you know, a base point. But then even there, I usually price things on the lower side. Why? Because I'm in favor not of this exclusive nature of art buying and dealing, but rather access. And affordability really provides access. And it takes away that idea that the thing is inaccessible and exclusive. And then lastly, community building and wealth circulation are extremely important. I think when you encourage a group, whether it be a racial group, academic identity, gender, whatever, pick your people. But when you support your people and they support you, you're better off and they're better off. And so, you know, in encouraging fine art acquisition amongst underrepresented groups, specifically Afrocentric people and people of African descent, it's a way to build community. It's a way to get people of African descent supporting artists that look like them, that come from where they come from, and then also to circulate that wealth within the community and to kind of help build each other up in that way. So now we'll talk a little bit about who participates generally in TLG and kind of to whom is the collective open. And if I'm going too fast or something of that sort, perhaps someone can send a message in the chat. So at this moment, TLG specializes in representing international artists of African descent. Why? Well, when I started this company, I did so using connections to artists that I had in Brazil. And I did this because I'm a history major. I've been to Brazil a few times. I have, you know, the interest and the capability, but more importantly, I think my skillship as a leader and as the leader of the organization really is more suited to helping international artists make their debut in the US market. I don't think that, for example, if I were representing an Afrocentric artist who is North American, say based out of Philadelphia, that I would be able to offer as much value to that person as I do to artists like Bartô or Francisco. And so that's just something I had to really think about early on, and whether, because there's always folks asking. In my email right now, there's people sending portfolios and asking for representation, but as a single manager, I don't have the capacity, one, to manage all the people who come to me asking for representation, but then two, I also have to think about where my skill set and energy is best used. And as I said, I just find that given my language capabilities and other things, it's just makes more sense to focus on representing international artists because I can offer more value. However, I am always looking for collaboration opportunities, especially with Philadelphian artists, but more broadly with artists in the US in general. I recently started collecting some pieces from Philadelphian artists, which is new for me, as a way to kind of bridge that gap and make that connection, because when folks hear about my organization and I tell them what I just told you, they say, well, you know, I'm an American artist. There's really no benefit for me, perhaps, from being in touch with you or working with you. But I'm trying to change that perception a little bit. And then lastly, I want to just make this point to the students, both about collaboration opportunities to show work or what have you, but also publication. I have a really small branch of my company, which hasn't been active in a while, but it's a publication branch. And last year, when I was in Europe and thus away from kind of the business, I took on an intern, and what she did mostly was produce stories for this publication. One of the stories that was published was a Philadelphian artist who is a fashion designer. So she's not a painter, she's not a photographer, she's slightly different from what we usually celebrate, but she's a friend of mine and she's doing some really interesting creative things. And so I wanted to celebrate that and, you know, give her a chance to be highlighted. So with that being said, students who are here that may know other students, get in touch with us on Instagram, because there's an opportunity for you, I promise, whether it's a collaboration opportunity or just the opportunity to show your work to a slightly different audience. We're more than happy to collaborate and to talk about that. So please don't hesitate. Now we're just going to talk a little bit about, you know, why Reflections of the Afroperiphery and why this title for this show. In June of this past year, I guess I'll make it a little bit more clear. From May to about July of this past year, I was in Brazil. On one hand, completing an internship for an urban tourism firm in São Paulo, which specializes in international clients. But also, I was there doing some of my own work, collecting art, meeting with the artists I manage and represent, and kind of just driving the business forward. So I was invited to attend a show where I had an artist who was participating in it. He had a piece that was being featured in the show. It was in the north zone of Rio de Janeiro city, which is a suburb, but the way these things work is a little different from in the US. In Brazil, suburbs are poor. They are usually full of colored or Afrocentric people of African descent, rather, working class people, and they're kind of shut out from the mainstream society, which is in the capital city, where the money is and where the beaches are. So here we think of suburb as being well planned and great schools and usually white, depending on where you live, but it's the complete opposite in Brazil. So I went to the North Zone. I go to this show that is put on by this Afrocentric collective called Cambaqua. This collective is run entirely by people of African descent, entirely by people from favelas, and I'll get into the significance of favela life in a second. But the show was just monumental, and so I'll kind of talk a little bit about why. But the theme for this show definitely came from this show called Mungenge, which was put on by Cambaqua. Getting into a little bit into favela life, as I said, you know, favelas are not always suburbs, but you know, when I use the term Afroperiphery, which is a term that I created when I was in Brazil after thinking a lot about the people I was meeting and the experiences I was having, people of Afro descent in Brazil are shut out of society, both in terms of art, where they're, you know, having to fight to get shown in museums, but also in the political and social arena. I mean, literally, people are not able to be as involved in politics, which represent them. People are not, you know, they don't have as much opportunity to sometimes things like clean water, electricity. And so it's this really clear message from Brazilian society that people from the favela, as talented as they may be, are not valued and are not welcome. And so as a history major and as a person who is outside of the society, but who also understands it a little bit, given my experience as a person of African descent in the US, it's important for me to recognize those people. I've been to favelas, a few of them myself. I know people who live in them. And the common perception is that, you know, everyone who lives in a favela is a criminal, that you know, there's nothing but crime, and this couldn't be further from the truth. So literally, you know, and I'll get into this later, but all of the artists that I manage are from favelas, all of them. All of them. So the idea that, which is very common in Brazil, that there's nothing but criminals in favelas and that people in favelas are not worth supporting is just insane. And so a lot of my work, but also the inspiration for this show, came from wanting to prioritize these identities of favelados, as they're called in Brazil. And so I think the exhibition is important for that reason. Not only the one that happened in Camboquia, where it was a collective of favelados who were representing art that was all by people of African descent and people born in favelas, but for this show as well, to bring the favelado identity and to bring the Afro-Brazilian identity to the US, to North America, to give North Americans the opportunity to interact with it is really important to me. It's one thing for me to have access to this reality and to be in conversation with these folks and wanting to support them, but there are a lot more folks that I know who, if given the opportunity, would also be interested in hearing these narratives and in supporting them. One thing I'll mention is that at the show in Rio in June, I saw a piece there that I actually acquired for the show now. So there's a piece in Holy Family that is called Os Margens que Banham o Centro, or The Margins That Bathe the Center. And it is a painting in there of Black Afro-Brazilian baby in a tub with kind of Brazilian flag around it. And so I saw that piece there and instantly knew that I wanted to acquire it for this show. It was fascinating. It was potent, and it really said a lot without saying much at all. And so I got in touch with the artist and definitely made that happen. And so lastly, just about the replication of this show and the term. This show's not a complete replication, actually. It's not a replication at all. The show that happened in Camboquia was termed Mugenge. It was not a reflection of the Afroperiphery, but just in attending this show and understanding the significance of giving people from the Afroperiphery a voice and a space to share that voice was important to me. So I knew I had to do something like this in the US. And because I had this relationship with Provenzano Gallery that was bubbling and brewing for some time, I got in touch with them and we were able to make it happen. And as I say, I created this term Afroperiphery, which really designates or describes more thoroughly, I think, the condition of Afro-Brazilian people in Brazil. You know, they're shut out in so many ways, physically, by being removed to kind of the periphery of the city, but then also socially by not being allowed to access the splendors of society that people who have a little bit more privilege are able to. So now I will just run through some slides pretty briefly. I'll try to do maybe 10 seconds per slide, just kind of talking about some of the artists that are part of the show, who I'm really happy to introduce. So this is Guilherme Hakim. He is a member artist of TLG since 2022, since December 22. And I will make a little bit of a distinction, as you see, between member artists and associate artists. And I have, of course, Guilherme's contact information or anything of the sort. So as I say, I'm going to try to run through this quickly. But if you're interested in contacting a specific artist, please reach out, because there's more than enough contact information to go around. So as I say, this is Guilherme. He's from Olinda, Pernambuco, which is a state in the northeast of Brazil. This is Marcos Aurelio. He's also a member since 2022. I didn't put the month because Marcos is the first artist that I started representing. I saw his work being posted on Instagram back when he had no portfolio, like 300 followers. And I said, hey, man, your art's great, but there's no traction. I believe in it. I see the potential. I know you're talented. Let's do something. If you allow me, if you give me access to your work and allow me to have access to it, I will represent you and I will promote it. I'll pay to promote it, and I'll try to get you as much recognition as you can, because you just as I can, because you deserve it. And so Marcos is the first artist that I began working with, and he's stuck with me until then. So I'm very grateful to still have him around. This is Albarchi. He's an associate artist of mine. So associate artists are artists with whom I work and do business, but artists that I don't represent. So usually with associate artists, it's focusing on either artist development, so putting them in touch with other artists that I know so that they can have certain questions answered, or exhibition opportunities where their work, again, is not going to be sold, but just shown. So I met Albarchi actually at the show put on by Camboquia in Rio, and that piece of the Brazilian baby is his. He had it there in the show. I saw it. I instantly loved it. And so a few weeks of conversation, long conversation between the two of us, between his manager, finally, eked out a contract for us both to sign for me to be able to import that piece to the US. So I was very happy about that, and also very happy to meet him. He's extremely talented. He's doing shows all over Brazil, from the Northeast to the Southeast, to where he lives. So I'm very excited to see where he ends up in just a few short months. And if you all have the opportunity, you should also tune in, because he's a really interesting character. This is Barto. Barto is actually on the call right now. I'm not sure if you guys can see him, but he is a member since this year. He just became a member in June. I put out probably in early May, before I went to Brazil, an artist call, looking to meet with some artists who had their portfolios and such, just to kind of see what the scene in São Paulo was looking like. So Barto was one of the artists with whom I met. Through some conversation, a few meetings, we decided that my skill set and his interests kind of aligned, and that it would be beneficial for us to work together. So we've been doing that since May. It's been wonderful. Barto also has a piece called Jam Session in the show at Holy Family, and he had a few other pieces in the show at Provenzano Gallery, which I did not include in this one. And Barto is from São Paulo, as I said, and he's born in 2004. I'm not sure if you saw that Guilherme Hakim was born in 2004, but that's another thing that I want to emphasize, is that a lot of the artists that I work with are young. Barto's younger than me. I was born in 2003. So also this idea that, like, you have to be a 50-year-old person with like 30 years of experience or something to be a painter and to be internationally represented and to be, featured in shows internationally is just not true. And beyond that, you can be born in 2004. And if you make the right connections and work hard enough, I think things can really work out for you. So I'm really trying to dispel this notion that either artists or collectors are old, or that it's exclusive work. You can be, I promise you can be born in 2004 and be successful. And Bartol and Guilherme and Francisco, who I'm going to talk about a little later, are prime examples of this. And me, being born in 2003, only 21, having started the company and doing the work, prime example that anyone interested, the opportunities out there, and it's possible. This is Cordel Urbano. We call him Ney. I'm going to play the short video that I actually took of him. Compared to the other people, I have photos, but for Ney, I have a video. I'm going to play the short video that I took of him when I went to visit him for the first time in May, in São Paulo.
Isso. Quando você se trata da arte local, a referência sempre é aos artistas regionais. Aí eu fico muito feliz que tenho encontrado esse lugar. E olha isso, gente. O berço das artes da cidade, assim. O lugar mais democrático da arte. Isso.
So, I'm not sure. I'm assuming that most people in the audience don't speak Portuguese. And so what I was talking about with Cordel Urbano was that one day I was walking after work. I stumbled upon this random place. Really, it was random to me. But what I found out was that it's called Batman's Alley. And it is a very famous street art code for street artists and people who sell their wares in São Paulo. It's a place where they aren't harassed by police. It's a it's probably the most touristic place in the city. So there's a lot of foot traffic and a lot of opportunity for painters like Cordel Urbano to paint and then to sell. So if you saw in the video, he was actively painting, which he does there, and that's kind of how he makes his living. He has a van in which he has a sort of museum set up, and so it was so cool to be able to walk into this museum, really, and be told about all the pieces and be educated. But if you can see, as I said, he sits there every day and he makes the work that he then hangs in his museum. And what he mentioned was that place was the most democratic place to make art in the entire city. And I thought that was, when I heard that day, I thought it was so important, because I, as a tourist, for lack of better words, had just stumbled upon this place by accident. But he and other artists that I'm now associated with go there every day, and this is their living, and this is how they make their money. So for me, it just really represented the dedication and the hard work that goes behind the beautiful paintings that we see. And we don't often see the hard work and the process as much. So it was such a treat for me to go, and I asked him if I could have this video just to share it at future moments. I'm glad that it found some use here now. This is Clicky. He goes by Master Clicky in reference to the camera. He actually works with Cordell Urbano. They work right next to each other in that same spot. So I'm not sure if you saw in the video, he was behind him sitting in the chair. And Click is a photographer. He sells his photographs there in Batman's Alley, while Cordell Urbano focuses more on paintings and such. But Click, born in 1995, born in São Paulo, is an associate artist. So I don't represent him in the same way that I do Bartol or other artists. But I have obviously included some of his work in various shows, including at Holy Family, where if you look, there are two photographs of sort of favela scenes. These are photos, one from Click's own window, but also one from his neighborhood during the 2018 World Cup celebration. So he's a photographer whose photography is very personal. Not only does he photograph things like protests and things happening in the city, but he really demonstrates, what it's like to live where he lives, which is in a favela in the north zone of the city, which is not, when people think of Brazil, like they think of beaches and the fun, but this vision of what it means to be Brazilian does not often get published. And so Click is instrumental in, popularizing this experience and popularizing this identity, which, as I say, is so often kind of underwritten or overlooked. This is Gustavo da Silva Nogueira Lima. He just goes by Gustavo, but he's a member artist since 2024. So another one of these artists for whom I had put out an artist call, and I went to São Paulo and scheduled some meetings. And after seeing some of the work and talking about kind of my skill set and their interests, a few meetings, we decided that it would be a good idea for us to work together. So Gustavo also has a piece which is called Split Vision. And it's one of the larger pieces, if not the largest piece at Holy Family right now. I included a different piece by Gustavo in the show at Provenzano. So the show that you're seeing at Holy Family is new. A lot of those pieces have never been seen in the US. And I wanted to kind of give a slightly different experience for folks there, given that I had already had some of these folks' art up at Provenzano. So again, the piece that I have by Gustavo is a different piece that was not seen in New York. This is Francisco, who is an associate artist, and I believe he's on the call, or at least he was if he isn't currently. And Francisco is very interesting. I originally saw his work on Instagram a few months before I went to Brazil this past time. And I had been following him and kind of just, keeping up to see what was going on. And one day he posted something that was really, really interesting to me. It was essentially a painting of political theory. It was making a very potent political statement. And so I DM'd him and expressed my interest. And long story short, we ended up meeting when I was in Rio de Janeiro. He showed me some of his work, and I decided to bring, with his permission, of course, a piece of his print back to the US. And I believe this piece is also in Holy Family. It is called Second Coming. And it's a very, very, very potent piece. So if we did include it here at Holy Family and you have the opportunity to see it, I definitely recommend it. Francisco, very interestingly, is of Cape Verdean descent. So I'm not sure how many people are familiar with Cape Verde, but the Portuguese colonized huge portions of the world, including Brazil and the Cape Verde Islands, which are a small group of islands off the coast of West Africa. So Francisco and his family were born in Cape Verde, a Portuguese-speaking country. When he was very young, he moved to Brazil. And so it has this very interesting perspective as an outsider, but also an insider who, again, has a culture from within or from without that was then forced to kind of assimilate, for lack of a better word. So he still retains a lot of his Cape Verdean characteristics, which I appreciate. This is probably one of the most interesting artists that's featured in this show. Why? Because he's not Brazilian. This is Malachi, an artist that I met in June, or in May, right before I went to Brazil, in Philadelphia. He is a sophomore in college right now. As you can see, he's born in 2004. He goes to school in Boston, extremely talented. I actually purchased a piece of his, which is in Holy Family right now. I believe it's untitled. It's an abstract piece, but I acquired this piece of his because I don't usually buy art of that type. It was new for me. It was exciting. he was doing an auction. I put in an offer and it worked out. But after that, which happened online actually, we then found a time to meet in Philadelphia, to have some coffee, to talk about his work. And he's a very interesting artist, whom I don't represent now, but with whom I am working and with whom I hope to do some interesting things in the future besides just collect his work. Um, and just to emphasize that age portion again, he's born in 2004. So another clear example of the fact that age is not a limit. And unlike all of the other artists that you've seen, he's from Pennsylvania. So I don't, as I say, usually represent American artists. And it's kind of weird. You might be thinking why this one piece is by a Philadelphian when all the other pieces are by Brazilians. But I would have found it very disrespectful, given the person I am, not to give Malachi this opportunity, given the fact that I'm doing this show in Philadelphia and that I've acquired his piece, for some time now. So I just thought that it would be, beneficial for him to have this opportunity. So just to clear up why, all the pieces are from Brazil and this one randomly is from Pennsylvania. Now, I have a few slides just specifically about the pieces. I'm not going to talk too much about them, but I do have a little description and I have some photos from the last show, which will kind of give some perspective. So this piece, which is currently in Holy Family, is called Before All This Internal Conflict. It was just me, cartoons, cereal, and my blue Nokia phone. And this piece is really meant to symbolize the nostalgia of the childhood of the author, of the painter. So if you get a chance, definitely check this out. And I think it's one of those pieces that the more you look at it, the more is made apparent to you. So definitely give it some time. It's worth it for sure. And this piece was a piece that I imported myself from Brazil this past summer. These pieces are by Navy Tau or Cordel Urbano. These were some of the pieces, as you might have seen in the videos, some of the kinds of pieces that he paints when he is in the Batman's alley. I saw all three of these pieces for sale and I got all of them. There were a bunch of other ones, but these were just the ones that stood out to me. The piece in the middle is the one that this slide is focusing on, called The Relationship Between Capoeira and Me. Capoeira is a Brazilian martial art form of dance, which is derived from Afro-descended enslaved people who use this as a form of self-defense and as a form of recreation that would not get them in trouble with their owners. And so it is a centuries-old form of, as I say, martial arts, self-defense, and dance, which is very common in Brazil as a form of physical activity even today. And this slide refers to the piece at the top, which is called The Face of Samba. Samba is a genre of Brazilian music with which I myself am enamored. It is a genre of music that, again, comes from Brazil's African influence. And so it's just a genre of music that is well known by people of African descent in Brazil and that is very popular. And so when I saw this piece, it reminded me of a very famous Brazilian samba singer called Jorge Benjor. And so I love this piece and I wanted to acquire it for myself. This piece is called O Sertão, the wilderness. The Sertão is a region in Brazil in the northeast, which is desert-like. It's very dry, and much like favelas, people are kind of put there to just die, essentially. There is often famine. It's, as I say, very dry, so there's not as much access to clean water. And beyond that, in the cities, the government is not as concerned with even providing those people the kinds of things they need. And so this piece for me is really revolutionary in the sense that it paints a scene of a family being prosperous in a zone where to be prosperous is seen as defiance. It's expected in Brazil when people talk about sertanejos, which are people from the sertão. It's kind of assumed that they're poor, illiterate, and malnourished. And so to have this vision of a healthy, safe family in the sertão just enjoying life, to me was a really bold statement, again, against the widely held perception of what it means to be from the sertão and what it means to have that identity. So Ney, who is from the sertão, is challenging that every day by painting simple things like this, folk art. And I appreciate that. And I wanted to give other people access to, again, this identity of what it means to live in the sertão. This piece is Francisco's. This is the piece I was referring to, The Second Coming. And it's a very, 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 very political piece. Both the painting, which this is a fine art print of a watercolor painting, but the description, which he mostly wrote himself as well, is very, very, very political. And it reflects a particular awareness of what's happening in Brazil and what has been happening over the last few years in politics that is rare, I think, for someone his age. And so I really wanted to, when I saw this piece and learned what was behind it, wanted to, again, give other people the opportunity to kind of tap into what's happening and what motivated the painting of something so graphic like this. This is Bartol's piece, which I believe is at Holy Family right now as well. This piece is called Jam Session. And I was really taken aback by it when I first saw it in Sao Paulo. And so I immediately knew that I had to bring it to the US and have it shown. And just given the color composition, everyone I've showed it to has had very interesting things to say about it, sometimes slightly different, which I always appreciate. And it's one of my favorites. So I definitely, because I love it, wanted to give other people the opportunity to see it. These two are Click's pieces, which are also in Holy Family right now. And as I say, the piece on the bottom is a picture right out of his own window. And the piece on the top is also in his community in 2018. So this slide refers to the picture on the top, which, as I say, was from 2018 during the World Cup celebration in his community, which is captured on a Sony. The slide refers to the second picture, which, as I say, is a picture right outside of Click's own window. And you can kind of see the kind of plethora of different kind of makeshift houses which comprise the favela. People are instructed or expected to build their own houses without proper electricity or heating or water. So once they manage to build the house, they then got to siphon off all of these essential services to make sure that they can survive, which is a tough existence and one that Click is very adamant about making public and visibilizing, which I appreciate. This is Albarchi's piece, the piece I was talking about, which I acquired or started acquiring. It took a while. Started acquiring when I was in Brazil this past summer. And this piece, if you're familiar with the Brazilian flag, is very potent because the characteristiclessness of the face of the subject, I think, really lends itself to a universalization. There are a bunch of artists, not too many, but a few rather, in Brazil right now who are focusing on this what I'm calling the faceless movement, but really it's a featureless movement. And what this does for the viewer is it makes the subject, again, very universal, and it allows the viewer to see himself. I'll speak for myself. It allows me to see parts of myself and parts of my identity in the subject. And so what this piece is meant to say is, despite the fact that, Afro-Brazilian people are marginalized, they are integral to the Afro-Brazilian, to Brazilian identity, not even Afro-Brazilian identity, but as Brazilian culture is a mix of indigenous European and African, culture and language and ethnicity, you, by definition, don't have modern Brazil without people of African descent. So this is a piece that, rather than marginalizing how Afro-Brazilian people as they're usually done, it puts them in the center and really kind of reasserts their significance, which I really appreciate. And you can see that he's doing this while kind of superimposing it, if you will, on the Brazilian flag, which really says, I'm Afro-Brazilian and I'm here. No matter how much you try to marginalize me or put me to the side, I'm here and I will always be here. And so it was potent to me, and I knew I had to bring it back to the US. And this is actually a piece that is a part of my personal collection for that reason. This piece, super, super interesting. I remember when Guilherme painted this probably close to 2 years ago now. It was in Brazil for a long time. I picked it up myself this past summer and imported it myself to the US. But there's a lot going on here. And this is one of those pieces when we think about art. There are some pieces which are great for acquisition. There's some pieces that I either come across that I say, I know this is going to do well and be acquired by someone else. And there are other pieces where I say, this needs to be shown, this needs to be seen, this needs to be interacted with, but it's so potent and the subject matter perhaps is grotesque or whatever, that it's not as likely going to be bought outright by someone. And so these are the kinds of pieces which have so much personality and share such a rich narrative once you get into what is behind them, that thanks to places like Holy Family, they deserve to be seen. Even if they're not bought, they still deserve to be interacted with. So again, I'm grateful for the folks at Holy Family and specific Professor Flynn for giving me the opportunity to put this piece in the show in particular, which, as I say, deserves to be seen, and which I did not include in the last show for various reasons. This piece is probably my favorite. I'll just be completely honest. It's one of the more simple pieces, but yet the most complex, I think. I also remember when this was painted back in 2023. It seems like forever ago. This piece was not included in the Provenzano show, but I do have it at Holy Family, so definitely take a look when you get the chance. As I said, one of my complete favorites, kind of just this impressionist piece that Marco managed to eke out, and I love it. This piece is a new acquisition. It's a small one. It's also there in the gallery. And Marcos does really well. We do really well with selling his A4s in the US. They're popular, I think, because of the size. And also he usually distinguishes between subject matter for these kinds of paintings. So they're difficult to describe, usually very figurative or featuring people, realist in that way, as opposed to some slightly more abstract things he'll do for larger pieces. But I love this and just thought that it would be wonderful to share with you all. This is also a piece which belongs in my personal collection, which I've acquired from Marcos. This piece, also a part of my personal collection, only acquired in late August, early September, really, is by Cordell Urbano. So it's slightly different from anything I usually acquire. For the first kind of strict year and a half, I was only focusing on fine art prints, and then I moved into importing fine art, whether it be oil or acrylic, and now I'm into some photography and also this kind of sculpture or wood carving. I think material arts in that way, crafts, wood carvings and things like that are important, just as important as painting. And so this next phase of my work is really going to be to emphasize this kind of art, this craft art. And I'm looking at a show next spring, which would allow me to do that. And so, as I say, this is a wood carving. I wanted to include it just because I thought it was really interesting. And once I learned how much work it went into making this, I knew that it would be worthwhile sharing with you all. So this piece here, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, is called Split Vision. It's by Gustavo da Silva. It was not at Provenzano, so you guys are the first people in the US besides my very close associates to see it. It will, of course, make its way around, to other venues, and it will have a chance to be seen. But for now, you are the first, so congratulations. What I find interesting about Gustavo's art is that he's an amateur. I'll just put it out there. He only started painting like within the last year. But what I admire about him and why I decided to represent him is because despite the fact that he's an amateur, art for him is really personal. I mean, maybe it's personal for all artists, but the reason why artists paint are different. And he uses art specifically as a sort of mental outlet. When he is frustrated or having anxieties or having some really serious, mental health situations in life, he has always found that being creative, but only recently that painting has been a great outlet for that. So when I look at his paintings, some of which have a very potent, very serious subject matter, though they're painted in this sort of amateurish style, the connection between how he manages to use the art as expression and then the colors that come as a result of that I find fascinating. And so I want to see Gustavo develop over the time, which is why I'm deciding to support him now, very early in his career. He is a little older than me, but as an artist, he's very young in that sense. And so he's still got a bunch to learn, but I see the potential. I think this piece is a clear example of that, and he's only going to get better. And so I really wanted to support him now and get in early while I can, because I think he's going to do well, and he just needs some training and a little support. This is Malachi's piece. Very new for me. I don't usually acquire things like this, or before, rather, I acquired this piece. I hadn't acquired things like this. It's very abstract. It didn't have enough definition for me. But I wanted to switch things up and take a chance. As I say, he was doing an auction. I put in my bid. I won the auction. And so I kind of was obligated in that sense to then pick up the piece. And it was a risk for me. I wanted to try something new. I wanted to give this kind of ultra modern abstract art its chance. And what I found is that I actually love it. I actually love this kind of art, despite the fact that, when you read what people are saying, they kind of crap on this abstract art and say it either has no meaning, or that, it's very hard to discern the meaning. I kind of appreciate that, and I think that it's one of the strong points of this kind of art, and one of the reasons perhaps which why I'm going to start acquiring it in the future. So now, just to kind of talk a little bit about why did I decide to include these artists in this show? Well, from Bartol to Francisco to Guilherme, as I say, all of these artists are Afroperipheral, meaning they, both literally live on the outskirts of kind of mainstream society, but also because of their ethnic identity, have not been given access to participate in the art world, in political society, as much as other people have. And also, their pieces share these rich personal narratives, not just narratives about Brazilian culture or society largely, but mental health and personal relationships, and things that, only through talking to the artists in another context would you have the opportunity to learn. And so these pieces really provide access to the personal narratives of the artists in a way that, again, you were only really able to be able to get through talking to them. So for that reason, I chose these specific artists to be in the show. So now, just to talk a little bit about what does the future look like for TLG. Well, TLG doesn't have any exhibitions currently planned for 2024. We've done two. Holy Family will be the second one, and we'll, come to pick up the art in kind of mid-October. Very grateful for that. TLG is moving to Brazil in May. So we'll be there from May to August, and our goal as of now is to do weekly shows starting in June. So we're in talks now as an organization to acquire a space and to kind of concretize some of those things. But Brazil is going to be kind of the preferred location for our work for a few months next year. I'm also looking at another show at Provenzano for the spring, so definitely keep folks tuned in about that. And then lastly, one of the things that is really on our agenda is to look at a semi-permanent physical space. We will do that in Brazil next year, as I say, but even within the US, TLG is looking for opportunities to have a semi-permanent physical space. It is wonderful when organizations and galleries like that at Holy Family or in Provenzano in New York are willing to give us the opportunity to collaborate and to have our art in your spaces, but it also is a risk to have to rely on that as a way to show art. And so TLG is definitely in talks now with some folks in the Jersey City area, with some folks in the Wilmington, Delaware area, to find us a semi-permanent space so that we can give the community access on a more consistent basis to the great things that we have to offer, of which the show, both at Provenzano and at Holy Family, are just appetizers. There's much more interesting and worthwhile art, I think, that I have in my kind of vault that I haven't necessarily either been given the opportunity or sought out the opportunity to show. So if you think that the art that you've seen thus far is interesting, I promise you it's just an appetizer, and there's much more that I haven't made public and that I'm just waiting for the opportunity to do so. That pretty much wraps up the bulk of my presentation. I understand maybe some students had to go, and that's totally understandable. But I will open the floor up to Professor Flynn or maybe some other folks for questions related to the organization or the mission, the artists, or even my experience, my own experience as a business owner, as a young business owner, and as now essentially a young curator. But as I say, that is that wraps it up for my presentation. I'm very grateful to have had the opportunity, and now I'll move into taking questions if there are any.
Okay, thank you so much. Madam, do you have any questions? It was very good. I liked it. Interesting. I have one question. No female artists.
Say again?
No female artists.
Correct. So when I first started TLG, I did have a few female artists who were associates. So what I was doing was selling fine art prints of their work, tote bags, and kind of these more simple things. And I did work with female artists at that time. Currently, as far as associate artists and artists that I manage full time, I don't manage any female artists, but I am looking. I'm always open. It's just a matter of who applies to be represented by TLG, and I frankly find that men are more likely to apply. Maybe that's because women think this is a male-centric organization, given the people who we represent currently, which is understandable, but it's not. And so, great question, and I definitely encourage. As I've been in talks with some female identifying people, I definitely encourage them to apply because we're more than happy to engage them and to work with them. We'd be more than happy.
Really great, really interesting. And I'll post this on the website so everybody can enjoy it. And you'll be able to use this video for yourself too.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Thank you so much. Really.
Absolutely. It's been my pleasure, and I appreciate you for not only being willing to have the art there, but then all the work you've done. I mean, we've emailed a lot and we've been in conversation about this. So thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. And I'm gonna come pick up the art in person myself. So I hope to see you in mid-October when I do that. And again, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to work with you. A sincere pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Okay, I'm gonna stop the recording.
Awesome.